Hi, everyone. We are here today with the Professor Sonnenschein. I'm going to tell you a little bit about him, and hopefully you are going to learn a heck of a lot more, and hopefully you've seen part one. If you haven't seen part one, this show is called Growth Factor. Usually you can click above and see the list of all the videos, or go below and go in the description. You can find more videos there and more about the professor. But I'm going to give you a quick summary about the professor. I'll do a screen share so you can see how to find some of his products. But we're going into his life history, and then we're going to go into how he helps people with the viral pathogen. And some people had to go and get this injection into them and get some help. So he helps. So Professor Leonard Sonnenschein, he is president of the Sonnenschein Institute. He has 25 different verticals associated in agriculture, sustainable living, health and wellness, and he helps humanity in identifying helpful nature-based products. So I just want to ask him more about himself. He was talking about living in India and basically not having electricity. If we can go into that, and also significant moments in your life. If you didn't hear, the professor with his family traveled by car all over America in his youth. So I like to hear more about India and more of what shaped you.
Well, I mean, the aspect of India is a profound, understanding of multiple religions, multiple lifestyles, multiple environmental histories. And I had been invited to participate in several conservation activities in India, and I fell in love with India and have been there, many, many, many times, and hope to go back soon. But really, it's a way. It's just a profound experience, and I think it's helped me in my exploration of what is possible. I would say, so I sponsored a postgraduate PhD student to do research in Kerala, which is a very important state in India, about conservation of freshwater fishes, which became a book, and we published this book, and we had conferences based upon this book. That was based on a previous book that I sponsored, with a multi-stakeholder, meetings to understand the conservation conditions of a group of fisher folk in the tributary Rio Negro to the Amazon River. And that book, became a published book. It was published by the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization as the first study of a multidisciplinary, a multi-stakeholder study of a production system within an ecosystem. So this is basically fisher folk, both primarily providing fish for the tropical fish trade, and how that the fisher folk and the community and the environment interacted in terms of sustainability. So that was what the Food and Agricultural Organization said. This is the first study of its kind, and they paid the money to publish the book. And that, again, is a pivotal situation in history of understanding sustainability. And we since have done books on Chinese fishery, the fisheries system in China, and we've looked at other ecosystems, in terms of other types of production in China and elsewhere throughout the world. So that some of the travels I've done is to study firsthand, living within a production unit, whether it's an aquaculture or an agriculture or a fisheries or a situation dealing with conservation to support tourism. These are all different types of cultures that can be made into sustainable solutions.
So I was going to explain another reason why I stay off camera, and the professor can't tell probably that I'm off camera a lot of the time, is in March of 2022, I had a procedure. I guess they found a disc is 6 millimeter, my L5S1, something like that. And it's probably from years of, I did boxing and martial arts and hiking where I would jump off, not big cliffs, but just pounding on my body and, car accidents being rear-ended. So eventually I guess some discs slip out. So I had to have lidocaine and dexamethasone inserted into me. So I'm standing while I do this because I can't sit for too long, and I'm stretching. So I'm doing this and I don't want to distract everybody. So that's another reason why I stay off camera. But mostly I want you to hear the professor and hear all about his life. And again, we're going to go probably into part 3 about how he helps people who've been injured by certain things that we can't really say on camera, but he's been incredible in helping people. He does it pro bono. People can donate if they want to, but he works with 20 to 30 doctors. And we're going to get into that. But first, I still want to get into, this mastermind, how he became who he was. So if you don't mind getting a little bit more into the bird, in part 1, the professor talked about helping a bird who was injured. How long did the bird stay with you? Number 1. Then I'm going to ask you about an aquarium in California, Long Beach Aquarium. I think that's what it's called. So I'd like to ask you.
Monterey Bay Aquarium.
Monterey Bay is
the Long Beach Aquarium is another aquarium story too.
Okay, I'd like to hear that about the bird and then Long Beach Aquarium.
So the bird, it took about a month to fully heal and learn how to fly again, and then the bird would come back to visit from time to time. So in nowadays, anytime I see a mourning dove, which is a beautiful gray bird that is primarily a bird that spends time on the ground and cooing, I feel like, I have a symbiotic relationship with that bird, even though it's not the same bird, because I remember the cooing and the walking around, and, it's just, so that's that symbiotic relationship I had, that time with nature is just continued. I very much care for things, all living things, whether they're little birds or little dogs or bears or sloths or fish. They're all, all my little tiny friends who my heart and soul is dedicated to their well-being. The last museum that I built was a museum where people could come and buy feeding tickets, and the feeding tickets would allow them to feed the animals. And
I have to interrupt. I never interrupt yet. That is brilliant. I'm going to go back. That's amazing. What a great invention.
So what, you could feed an 8-foot crocodile, and he would jump up almost 10 feet in the air to grab a piece of fish off the stick. Or you could feed a sloth, or you could feed a little tiny honey bear, which is a little thing that looks like a bear and a monkey combined. And he would come up and grab the food right out of your hand and put it into his little mouth. Or you could go in with a Coati Monday, which is a South American raccoon, and they would crawl all over you, or grab the food out of your little fingers. Or you could feed little tiny river otters, and they would come up and grab the food right out of your fingers. You could feed the fish, and the fish, some of them were giant fish that looked like piranhas, but they would jump out of the water and grab the food out of your fingers. Or a gar, this is a 4-foot gar that has, teeth that are like 2 inches long, and it would grab the food out of your fingers. But in order to feed it, you'd have to be on top of the fish tank. And every time it would jump out of the water, grab the food, your heart would stop, literally, because it was so shocking to see this 4-foot fish jump out of the water with these huge teeth to grab the food.
Could you spell gar? Sorry to interrupt. What's gar? How do you spell gar? Where is it from?
Gar.
Sure.
And so we'd have to catch the people before they'd fall on the floor because so this is a highly interactive museum. We had alligators and crocodiles, and we had a 100-pound snapping turtle that you could feed. All the animals you could feed just by feeding tickets and go throughout the museum and feed the animals. And people would spend hours. It was a little tiny museum, and but people would spend sometimes hours, especially people with young kids. Or you could come for a tour. We had a behind-the-scenes tour that would be a 2-hour tour. It was always sold out. Every weekend we'd do the tours, and the tours would sell out. But this is a very personal way to experience nature. And that, that was a, museum that, really, created an emotional response. I mean, again, my friend Jean-Michel Cousteau, he talks about his dad, Jacques Cousteau. And what Jacques Cousteau would say is, you protect the things that you love. And if you can get people to, the second part would be, if you can get people to fall in love with the ocean, or fall in love with animals, or fall in love with nature, then you protect them. And, working with millions of people, engaging them in learning about, the ocean, and things that live in the ocean, and things that live in the forest, and getting them to love that. We've created generations of people who now, who live in urban situations, who still can relate to the natural world and protect it.
And what about the California Long Beach Aquarium? What did you have to do with that aquarium?
Well, I mean, that, so the Long Beach Aquarium, we were co-founders of the World Ocean Network, and the World Ocean Network invited the directors of aquariums, primarily, but there were also some zoos and other museums, to join us in creating messaging programs for these aquariums to communicate with the public. So, Long Beach Aquarium, Monterey Bay Aquarium, a lot literally over 100 other aquariums around the world use these messages to tell their visitors about what's happening in the real world and what conservation actions are happening. I was the chairperson of the Conservation Action Committee. So what my role was to identify, conservation actions that are happening, but also conservation actions that are making a difference for the future. So things that we dealt with early on were things like sustainable fisheries, which has become a big movement, or plastics pollution, which has become a big movement, climate change adaptation, which has become a big movement. But these are all things that, when we discussed them at the World Ocean Network, these had not even happened. These were things that were not on any reality level. And since then, because the hundreds of millions of people that go to these museums and learn about these concrete actions and things that are happening, then it's become transcendent into popular society. But in the early days, the problem is that these ideas for concrete actions were so controversial that even among the aquariums there was discussion. Well, can you really talk about sustainable fisheries, and can you really talk about climate change? Can you really talk about plastics pollution? And my insistence was, certainly it's better to bring these up in conversation and get people more learned about these issues, so that they can react positively to the polemics that they'll be facing in the future.
So, the reason I have my show, again, the reason I call it Growth Factor, is about growing, having fascinating people like you to interview, to help us all learn and grow together. Because as the professor, and we all know, everything's in a symbiotic relationship: the air we breathe, the trees, the plants, what's under the ground, what's up above us in the earth. So we're all connected, and we're all learning from each other. So a very good lesson that I'm learning already from you it has to do with anxiety. That's why I started my show. Like I was telling the professor, I had doom in my gut. I could be talking to a fascinating person like Dr. Sonnenschein and feeling such joy should be normal, but I wasn't feeling that for almost 2 years. And so what I'm learning from you is, in part one, the professor, in case you didn't see it yet, he was saying that one of the museums, they hate his guts. And look at this beautiful person. You say he helps animals. He has 2 dogs of his own. He's opened up museums. He helps the environment. And in part 3, we're going to get to how he helps people who got some of these things, and the virus affected them, things like that. So how can someone have a hatred? And he said, they hate my guts. And of course, we all have experienced that. No matter how good we are, no matter how giving, we're going to have hardships, and it's by design. It's by design. We are not in this earth to take wonderful little naps and act like Adam and Eve and God Eden in the Garden of Eden. We're meant to have tough challenges that shape us. So that's why I've been trying to get into the mind of the professor. How have you achieved everything you've achieved? So I want to ask you about that. Can you give us some life lessons, either from hardships you experience or just general? Let us know how to get through the anxiety, the hard time, the depression, and the hardships.
Well, I think that, God speaks to us all the time. How much time do we actually listen to what God speaks to us is really the difference between being successful and being a failure. That the failure occurs because we don't listen to our heart, we don't listen to God, we don't pay attention. Not only do we not listen, but we don't heed these important messages that we're being given. The stories, there's two stories that I love to hear in my brain all the time. Is the story of this person who is in a flood and his house is being covered, and he's praying to God for God to come save him. And boats are surrounding the house. And finally, the man is on top of the roof, and the flood takes him away, and he loses his life. And he looks up to God in his death and says, "You didn't come and save me." And God said, "Didn't you see the boats?"
I love that one.
And the other one is that is a person who is in such sadness, and in the sadness, you see this man walking on this man walking on the sand, and he gets to the other side, and he doesn't know how that happens. And God says, "I carried you. It was my footsteps that were there carrying you through the issues that you're facing." And I think that the most important thing is to listen to your heart and listen to God, and even if God tells you to do something that you just can't even understand, do it. Don't hesitate to follow your heart and follow your soul, and follow God in terms of being doing the best things that can happen for you. I guarantee you that you will not be dissatisfied if you follow those messages. I believe that that's the most important thing I have to say is God is in charge. Just listen to the messages.
Your little guards there were right on cue, saying they agree. So I have more questions about that. You mentioned the word God, so I was going to get into spirituality. And the reason, if you look below and you look at my show, from Ryan the surfer, who was dead almost 20, 30 minutes, but he went to a spiritual realm, to Sal, the accidental Talmudist, who watched his grandma's soul, Professor, when she took her last breath, he watched her. She was in the Holocaust. She lost her husband 60 years prior, never remarried. When she took her last breath, she watched the soul embrace the grandfather and saw the grandfather he never met, because he perished in the Holocaust 60 years prior. So my show was spirituality, and it still is. I get the chills talking about these things, but I moved more into nutrition because I have so many friends and family, including myself, dealing with mental issues, gut issues, skin, arthritis, pain. And so I'm starting to realize, through people like you and doctors I've spoken to and regular people, that what we ingest affects a lot. And some people love vegan and they think that saved their life and that's good for them. And some other people say, I got to have meat, I got to have liver, I got to have organ meats because that stops inflammation, versus vegan might be more of a insulin is being affected and glucose, and they have more trouble keeping it stable. So they can have issues like that. So I want to ask you first about the spirituality part and next about nutrition. Do you believe in a higher power? What does that mean to you? And I part two to that.
Yeah, there's no doubt that in whatever spirituality, there is a spark, of what is God. And I think God is omnipresent. Doesn't matter what religion you are. And even if you're not religious, you still have to understand that we live in such a miracle-based world, that there has to be some type of ether connection.
And I want to ask you if you had some miracle stories or coincidences. I know most of us don't believe in coincidences, but I'll just call it that. And if you look at my show, my friend Robin, she talks about these probably 7 different coincidences that you know cannot be coincidence. Can you share with us some miracle stories or coincidence regarding animals, the museum, your life, your family, anything like that?
Well, we have a dietary supplement, and we have several different products, and these products, help people in their wellness. Sometimes these products are being used in the most extreme circumstances, and the products can be used to increase oxygenation. So we have many stories of people who've taken this product when they went to the hospital and they put it into their water, and their oxygen levels went up. And if you have low oxygen levels, you can die. If your oxygen levels are high, you can have a good life. So every day I hear stories about how people have used these dietary supplements to really enrich themselves and their lives and their health. So I mean, every day I don't have one that I can say is the only one, because every day I get at least one.
I'm going to do a screen share again so you can explain how you help people and a little more background. Let me do a screen share. Okay, so it's called the website. Can you tell us what the website's called? And I'll put it in the description as well.
The answer is the website is Home of Health.
Good. And especially for people who can't see, I like to make sure that they can hear what we're saying. So homeofhealth.org.
Home of Health. Home of Health dot wild apricot .org. Home of Health dot wild apricot .org.
Can you tell us a little bit more about that, how you develop these products?
Sure. Well, this is a private member association. It's kind of like Costco for health, for well-being, for there you can learn more about different products in different. You can join different groups. We have a weekly case study group with doctors that talk about what their experiences are with various things, and and how to solve and how they have solved various issues with their patients. We have books, we have articles, we have all sorts of information. We have links to doctors, we have discussion areas. So these are all things to how to become healthier, how to improve your wellness. And these products can include things that deal with in a recent research study that was published in a peer-reviewed medical journal. We studied one of those products, and we saw really some phenomenal responses from that.
Is this the article? Sorry to interrupt, but is this the one, the effective aqueous electrical?
Right.
Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
So that's exactly correct. In that study, we saw people who were these are women who were living in a women's shelter, and every single one of them was depressed. And after 5 to 7 days of being on the product, none of them were depressed. So the clinical depression was reversed. We saw issues with asthma, arthritis. We saw issues even with a virus that is a devastating virus. People recovered in a very quickly. Almost unbelievable how quick people's recovery from these very severe issues that they were facing in terms of their wellness. They got better from this dietary supplement. So that,
Okay.
I think.
I was going to ask you, is that the virus that we're talking about, the viral pathogen that's been going on since 2020, that virus?
That's correct. That's
very good.
correct.
We're going to get so into detail with that in part 3.
So
wow.
This, this private member association gives you access, just like if you go into Costco, you can buy all these wonderful things that you wouldn't otherwise be able to buy. You can get involved with this, private member association. Instead of selling things like Costco, what we're doing is we're giving access to things that can help people's wellness.
Okay, so now you can see the website. I'll put it in the description. You can see the article. I'll put that in the description as well. There's a little bit more about the professor. And then did you want to go over any of these slides real quick so people know how you help? Or otherwise, I'm going to ask you a lot more about yourself. And then part 3,
Oh,
we're going to
sure.
get into detail.
I mean, so in the Sonnenschein Institute, we have 25 verticals. We have verticals that deal with wellness issues. We have medical. We have a medical organization. We have a not-for-profit organization. We have organizations dealing with fisheries, coral reefs, restoration of degraded soil, agriculture, aquaculture, and these are all in areas associated with energy and forest restoration, and that these are each of these areas have a number of different products, programs, services associated with, and there's information on each of these services on the website, and giving access to articles and historical information of laboratory studies that we've done. So, we have some of the top scientists on the planet working with us, pushing forward these ideas and studying them in the laboratory, and then moving them to field and to larger public utilization. So there's not a day that goes by that we're not doing something that's real in the environment, doing something that's real for people's wellness, doing something that's real for improving food production, doing something that's real that's dealing with climate change. And there's a lot of information on that website as well.
Well, I hope y'all didn't get too dizzy there. Oh my gosh, this is why, by the way, I do it in parts. I try to make it 20 to 40 minutes because you can see we can talk to the professor for 6 hours. And I don't think you want to sit here for 6 hours. That's why I do it in many parts. And you can also see he's so fascinating. We're just his brain capacity and all these things he's invented and how he helps people. But again, part 3 is going to be how he helps people. And there's a lot of people in your life right now that they need help, as you know. I don't want to say too much, but when I look around in my friend group, my acquaintance group, my neighborhood, there are people that one in particular professor is already helping or about to help, because that's how I met the professor, by the way. I was in a Zoom with Esther, I think her name's Black, and Professor Sonnenschein last week. And I said, who is this person, the professor? I need to know more about him. And I got my friend on the call because she did this 2 times because she works in elder care. She was a big manager of a big facility. So she did this to protect people. And instead of protecting herself, she has 3 children. She's a single mom and she cannot work. She has very strange things going on with her. So the professor is, I believe, already in contact, but we'll talk about that later. So I want to ask you, have there been any miracle stories in your life personally, through your travels or strange coincidences, anything spiritual that happened to you? If not, I have a different question.
Well, I have lots of very interesting stories, but the most recent story was that I was traveling across the country. This doctor acquaintance of mine, her car had broken down, and I had a car that I had put 250,000 miles on, and I loved this car. And I said, well, if you want, I'll bring you my car if you can help me do a clinical study on post-COVID, post-vaccine, and long haul, because we have some dietary supplements that have shown some benefits, and I wanted to have her, lead the study. So she said, sure, I need your car. I can use it and we can do the study. I said, so I drove 3,000 miles to give her my car. So if you look on a map and you look at South Florida and then you look at Los Angeles, that's how far I drove. That's a long way. And I didn't sleep. And on the way, I met with farmers. I met with colleagues, so I would stop, but I didn't sleep. I drove straight through. And as I was leaving Texas, there was a blizzard that hit in Arizona, and 18 inches of snow fell that right then and there, and the highway was, so all of a sudden I'm going out of Texas, which is in a drought, and I'm going into a snowstorm, and visibility is decreased. There's a mountain on one side and a canyon on the other side, and my car starts spinning in circles. I'm traveling 60 miles an hour and my car is spinning in circles. And I said, God, I don't have time. Stop playing with me. And immediately the car straightened up. And I went and I realized that was a good thing. And then I realized I was tired because I'd been driving at that point for about 30 hours. And I went to sleep. There was off the road, there was some area. It looked like a small village, but it was actually a rest stop. And when I woke up, got back on the highway, and for miles there was nothing but cars and trucks that had gone off the highway. There's tow trucks every few hundred feet pulling these cars and trucks out of the snow drifts, out of the canyon. and I realized that that was a miracle.
I love stories like that. And especially, I think we all have a magic power that a lot of us forget or don't know about. And that is when you reach out to that higher power, whatever you call it, God, Hashem, the light, creator, they have to respond.
Well, this was awfully funny because I really didn't have time. And I said, God, stop playing with me. I don't have time for this. And this car straightened up right then and there.
That is great. I love that. And I still want to, again, this is only part 2, so I still want to get personal with the professor so you understand what shaped him, because some of you are still growing and learning, or you're raising children or grandchildren, and you can see, excuse me, different life experiences, how it shapes us, especially, excuse me, his experience where his family, I don't know if you heard in part 1, they took road trips and they didn't stay in hotels, they stayed in tents. And he even mentions at one point, they tented at night, but when they woke up in the morning, they're on the edge of the Grand Canyon. And sometimes they were greeted by bears. So he has an incredible story. And you can see that's how it shaped him. How was he able to build museums and know animals so well? Because sometimes they were right in his face. So I wanted to ask you a little bit about that. How do you have a belief system? A lot of people say, no, once we take our last breath, we're gone. We're out of here. It's this darkness. We're just, I don't even know how anyone can believe that now that I'm 53, I think. I don't even know how people can believe that anymore, but I understand it. I have empathy, but it's just my journey, even your experience with animals, you can see how somebody created this. So I'd like to know, why do you have proof? Why do you think there's a higher power?
I think, that the books and studies by Joseph Campbell are really insights to religion and society. And these books, which are based upon interviews, and then interviews by famous famous news person studying the consequences of society, of religion. It's very clear that there is an existence that's in all of us, and that at the end of the book series, the interviews of religious leaders and all sorts of other people, that God is in all of us, that God is ever present, not as an individual entity, but rather than something that's inside of each of us, and that resonance that we feel between our fellow human being is really a resonance of that spiritual power. So that's I think that I think how we understand that is something that becomes personal, and becomes potentially a light for us in terms of how we do what we do. I think that a lot of times people forget their connectivity, and sometimes when the people forget their connectivity, then things, bad things can happen, and people can do things that would be otherwise unconscionable, or just without any reason. But if we go back to our soul and we ask ourselves who we are and what we're doing and where we're going, and we find God in all of us.
I want to ask you a kind of a strange question, but do you think there's only Earth or only this little marble? I mean, beings only on this planet, or do you think there's possibly other beings in other realms, and
Well,
why?
I don't, I mean, the answer is I think that life is something that is not necessarily unique to this planet. I think that the essence of life is based, can even be based upon chemicals mixing together that then create cells. But I think that there's the idea of the question of how does life exist and where are we and how these can be, you can get lost in space very quickly. I tend to focus on the here and now and what can I do, rather than get too far lost in space.
Yeah, I get it. Because sometimes I do think about that. I think, how can there just be us? There's got to be something else. And then a documentary I watched maybe in the last 6 months with people in the government who are now retired, saying that they've experienced something interesting. I forgot the name of the documentary, but it made me understand that very possibly there's something else. And I asked you that because your experience of being outdoors most of your life, and
Oh,
um,
sure. I mean, have I seen unusual objects in the sky? Absolutely.
like
Have
what?
I, just strange lights and strange things. I mean, and when I was a child, I studied a lot of these things, these mysterious things. It was fascinating. In my old age, though, I'm so tied to what I'm doing. I don't have time for those things. Those are dalliances. I have to deal with, issue, really polemic, uh, tear jerking issues that I have to keep my eye on the ball.
So we have 3 minutes left for part two. Then I'm going to get into part three, which is, again, I'm going to repeat, it's about the viral pathogen that's been around since 2020 and helping people who've done this as well, been damaged in both situations, because the professor's been helping a lot of people. And again, he does it pro bono. I want to ask you a little bit more personal. Your siblings, how many did you have? And you all had a very similar upbringing. I'm wondering what their life is like. How were they influenced? What profession do they choose?
Well, I'm the eldest. My second brother, who is number two, unfortunately, he died in a car accident on the weekend that I got married. So we buried my brother Sunday morning, and we got married Sunday night. And my sister is married to a wonderful man, and she has a garboon of grandchildren. A garboon is a large number. I can't even tell you how many grandchildren she has. And she's been very prolific. And then my little brother is a child psychiatrist, and he's just getting ready to retire. So that's my siblings. My son is a hospice chaplain, and he has two children. And my daughter is an assistant principal in a large school district, in a large school. So and she got her doctorate. My son has a master's in divinity. So they followed the footsteps. My first wife was a school teacher, and she was one of the top. She was recognized as one of the pillars of her school district, formally. So it's my second wife is an educator. She's a PhD, and she worked with children and works in a hospital setting now as a technologist. And we have two little 7.5-inch dogs that we rescued from a breeding facility where they never left the cage.
Oh.
So that's our mother and daughter. So that's my family.
Okay, beautiful. So we're going to go into part two. Again, look below in the description. I'll give you everything you need to know about the professor, how to reach out for his products. We're going to get into much more serious topics. I just wanted you to know about him because I was fascinated. I love the human journey, and we'll be back with part three. And please share, subscribe, hit the bell so you can get a lot more fascinating stories. And I'd love for you to share the professor's story. Thank you for being here.